Dani Isaacsohn, who is representative in Ohio, also the minority leader of the party. Going to hang out with us for a few minutes now. Good to have you back on the show, Representative. Thanks for being with us again.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Wow. It is good to have you back. And what's been happening since we had you on a few weeks ago? I mean, a lot of changes are taking place in Ohio. We've got some big races, the state with the Senate, as well as with the governor's race. Talk to us about what's going on.
We don't get to say that often in Ohio, right, that it's a good time to be a Democrat. Now we need to keep that going for the next few months. We got to keep that going for the next few months. But there is no doubt that the momentum you are reading, in the New York Times and the New Republican and Politico about, is this happening in Ohio? That momentum is real. We feel it on the ground every day. We see it both in our data, but also what our candidates are experiencing on the doors. There is a real hunger for something different, and that's showing up in particularly, everyone knows Ohio loves Sherrod Brown. We've loved Sherrod Brown a long time. Sherrod Brown was fighting on affordability and property, and populism, and before it was cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like Sherrod's been doing it his whole career, and he's running for the Senate to finish what he started, right? When he was the chair of the banking committee and was reining in banking and really making progress on housing. But I don't think anyone saw Dr. Acton coming.
No, I would agree with that. Yes, keep going.
And she has just been a total force. I'm meeting with her right after this, to talk about just how, we can help her finish strong. But everywhere she goes, people come out of the woodwork. She did an event in Meigs County and Vinton County. We're talking deep southeast Ohio.
Yeah.
Places that Democrats have not really been competing in and won for 20 years. And people just come out for her. Yeah. There's an excitement. There's an energy. There's an inherent trust that she's built. And she built it the hard way.
I was talking about that earlier, so thank you for reminding us of that. Democrats are leading in healthcare in terms of trust with voters across the country. The average is about 31% when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to affordability. And it's really amazing how that has become more and more kind of the resounding issue, the trust factor that Democrats on a state level, and then in this case, these are two statewide elections, both Senate and for governor, that Republicans are starting to realize that Democrats don't muck it up as badly as Republicans do. Talk a little bit about what your experience has been there.
Well, just think about the contrast that Ohioans are facing in this cycle. This is the affordability election, right? That is, we all know it. It's been that way since, inflation was super high under President Biden, and just the cost of living has continued to balloon and skyrocket under President Trump with groceries and gas. And so this is an election that is fundamentally about the cost of living. And on the one hand, in Ohio, you have a candidate running who is a billionaire, who flies around the plane on his private jet, flies around the state on his private jet, and made his money promising life-saving drugs that didn't save lives.
Nope.
On the other side is someone who grew up in the Mahoning Valley in Youngstown, spent a portion of her childhood experiencing homelessness, living in a tent with her sibling, eventually made and paid her way through medical school, became a, family and pediatric doctor, then went into public health to take a broader view, served under 5 administrations, including mostly Republican administrations, serving the public interest, right? And being a physician and a doctor, not a politician. That contrast could not be starker in the affordability election of 2026, when Ohio families are like, who understands what we're going through, who relates to it, who has empathy for it, and who is going to bring the fight about it? Is it the person who thinks that Ohioans and Americans in general are suffering because of a lack of work ethic? Or is it someone who actually understands what it means to take care of other people? And so I think you couldn't have drawn this up. 2 years ago, Dr. Acton was on the trail with us, and it wasn't obvious then, I don't think, that this is exactly what Ohio needs, but it's obvious now.
What's interesting too, Leader Isaacsohn, is that the the contrast that you just laid out with Dr. Acton versus Vivek Ramaswamy is that it's clear that he doesn't actually get it. And some of the things that he said, and we talked about this a little bit the last time you were on, some of the things that he said on the campaign trail and not on the campaign trail, while he's spending 40% of his time outside of the state, shows that he's just not connected and doesn't get it you didn't think I'd slip that in on you, did you? He's spending that much time outside of the state. He doesn't get it. And then to talk about things like, we should end certain programs that are directly tied to people's bottom line. But the contrast that you drew is that she gets it because she's from the area. She genuinely understands what people are dealing with. She understands the unique budgetary concern of not having proper health care in place and what that can do to ruin a family. And that, I think, that's a message that you guys are doing such a great job of making sure that people are getting and they're hearing and they're feeling it. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so, we are focused on in the House, as Dr. Acton hopefully becomes our next governor, how do we break the supermajority so she can actually govern when she wins, which means, and, in one of these seats, it's the last Republican held seat in Cuyahoga County, which is where Cleveland is.
Right.
And the representative there, it's a pretty middle of the road district, right? It's a true kind of, it maybe leans a little R, but it's a 50-50 district. Kind of mostly independent people, not a lot of, extreme views on either side. And for whatever reason, the representative there has gone full extreme MAGA to the point where he has become the poster child for how do we kick people off of Medicare and Medicaid? How do we limit their access? Went to DC to testify in front of Congress about it. And our candidate there is an oncology nurse, right, who is running because of how she has seen people get sicker and sicker, and the system is actually making them sicker. It's making them harder for them to access and afford their medicines. And so she's running against a guy who is cheering on the lack of access, is actually championing decreasing access to healthcare. And so that is a contrast that shows up a lot. And now that is, it's most extreme in that race, in that district. But it's, to your point about trust, we see this in both in our polling and in our conversations that we have. If your number one issue is healthcare, you're voting for a Democrat.
Yeah.
Because you've seen, especially in the last 2 years with what the Trump administration has done in partnership with state legislatures like Ohio's, it has just been to cut off. If you lived within 30 minutes of an urgent care clinic, it's probably 45 minutes now, right? If you were driving to your pharmacy, you're probably not able to access it now unless you live near a very big city, right? It's harder to get obstetric care.
And that's putting even more pressure, not to interrupt you, Leader Isaacsohn, that's putting even more pressure on those facilities that are open, because now, I mean, it's like a good friend of mine said to me years ago about traffic. Traffic is like a funnel. Only a certain amount can go through at a certain time. And inevitably you're going to wait. And while you're waiting, you're burning gas, you're burning resources. And that's what's happening when it comes to our healthcare system when we close these non-urban or even suburban facilities, is that it's a funnel. Only a certain amount of people can be treated at a certain amount for over a certain period of time. It puts more pressure on the folks that are working there, top down, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's what folks have missed about what happened last year with the ugly bill, what happened earlier this year with subsidies with regard to the Obamacare subsidies. And all the rest, everything that's in between. I mean, more pressure because of economic loss, i.e. the tariffs, and more pressure because of this Iran war puts more pressure on the local communities to survive and to not even try to thrive, but just to survive. And then it puts that pressure on the regional facilities that try to treat people. I know you see this all the time. Talk a little bit about that as you can.
And it's to your point about, it affects the people who are, it narrows the access to the funnel. This is what I think is so important, particularly in my part of the state. I live in Cincinnati, but in the southern half of Ohio, along the Ohio River, going into southeast Ohio, in Appalachia. When you decrease access to healthcare services in Appalachia, in rural parts of the state, you force people to make a choice. Do I drive the extra hour to make it to Cincinnati? Is my shoulder hurting enough? Do I think this is a heart attack? Right? Or am I going to get there in time to deliver this child? Or do you stay home, in which case, obviously, you risk, at worst, increase in death.
Yeah.
But what I think people miss is how tied into the healthcare that people in Cincinnati then get.
Yep.
Because if you're telling everyone east along the river all the way up to Gallipolis near West Virginia, you got to come to Cincinnati or Columbus for your healthcare. Well, then when your shoulder starts hurting in Cincinnati, or you're going to deliver your kid, there's less place for you to go.
Yep.
And it's driving your costs up pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
And so what I think we're seeing in Ohio, but not enough, when we need more of this in the country, but certainly something we're very focused on as a caucus, is we have to link these issues between Appalachia and our urban cores. Their healthcare outcomes influence our healthcare costs and outcomes. Whether their kids get enough, access to literacy training in school because they have enough teachers is going to impact our economy. And actually, if their kids aren't getting enough, you better believe that kids in downtown Cincinnati probably aren't getting enough. And so the future opportunity is, how do we link, particularly in healthcare and education, although not exclusively, but how do we link the healthcare outcomes, the educational outcomes between Appalachia and the urban cores across Ohio? And because once people get that their healthcare future and their educational futures are linked, I actually think it's much easier to form a coalition on a whole bunch of other issues. And this is where there's an opportunity particularly, and this is a little outside the scope maybe of where what you'll hear most Democrats talk about, but we have to build bridges to the MAHA movement, which, even though we disagree on vaccines and things like that, we can't ignore their concerns either.
Yeah.
Right? They're actually the concerns about the role that the pharmaceutical industry plays, the role of pharmacy benefit managers, the role that insurance companies play. Those are concerns that have long been Democratic concerns. We can't write them off because we have real disagreements over here. You got to find what do we agree, and let's build on that, because otherwise you just let them get away with it.
Yeah, that is a conversation that we all have to remember. Is that the consensus building allows us to get things done, hopefully faster, because we've put the bridge out and the bridge is working. So that is a big part of where we have to be. Leader Isaacsohn, we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about affordability. Let's talk about some of the issues that you're leading the party in Ohio as we make these moves forward. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Chu's Views. All right, guys, welcome back to Chu's Views. If you are just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu. We are talking with the minority leader of the Ohio House of Representatives. Leader Isaacsohn, tell us, as we I know you got to run this morning, got a busy morning. What is I guess you could say, for Ohioans as well as for folks throughout the country right now, when you think about voting for Democrats on a state level or on a federal level, what is it that you want people to hear and to really lock into right now?
I think the most important thing this election is to understand that the fact that the cost of living has skyrocketed, the fact that your groceries are so expensive, the fact that you get fewer access to fewer and fewer medicines that you can afford, that your doctor is farther away, that it takes longer to get an appointment, that your kid's school has fewer teachers, all of those things did not just happen to us. They are the result of choices and policies that have been pushed intentionally for a very long time. I have had a front row seat to it in the legislature. It is a direct trade to give the billionaires who own a football team $600 million of taxpayer money instead of spending the $600 million on lowering your energy bill. Right? That is a direct trade. You can invest in the infrastructure that will lower your energy bill, or you can invest in the infrastructure that will enrich these billionaires who own a football team. And if you expand that attitude out every year for decades, you get what we've gotten, which is an incredibly great place to live for the incredibly rich and a pretty hard place to live for everyone else. And what Democrats, I think, have finally wrapped our arms around in a pretty collective way is we have to do something about that first. It has to be our number one priority, not everything else, not all of our other hopes and dreams that we've long harbored. We have to bring people's cost of living down now. And the exciting thing is, you don't just have to do that by spending more government money. There's actually a huge amount you can do to bring people's costs down by building more housing, unlocking a construction boom, right? Increasing access to Ohio has this clean energy companies, solar and wind, are dying to come to Ohio. We have so much opportunity here. We could bring energy bills way down just with the backlog we've already got in solar and wind. Not to mention unlocking everything we haven't even, explored. And so what Democrats are embracing is an agenda that is both exciting, it's growth oriented, it's about the future, and it's not just more, government benefits. It's actually, how do we grow the economy in a way that brings your costs down? Not how do we grow the economy in a way that creates more and more billionaires, which is, so we've had, Ohio was ranked #1 for business by CNBC. That's cool, but it's actually not cool because it hasn't led to an increase in lifespan. It hasn't led to an increase in literacy. It hasn't led to more good paying jobs for more people who can save up for retirement and take their families out on vacation. It hasn't brought your grocery prices down. So it actually has no bearing on people's lives. Who cares that we're #1 for business? It matters if you're #1 for business if you then translate it to how people are experiencing their day-to-day life. And Democrats actually have an agenda that will make that translation happen, that will say this growth is going to lead to your life getting better and less expensive, more opportunity for you. That has to be the growth agenda that we have. And I'm excited to report that with Sherrod Brown, with Dr. Acton, and with our efforts to break the supermajority, that is what we are pursuing in Ohio at the moment. It took us a long time to get here, but we finally feels like arrived.
We're on the precipice of that, and it is the connective tissue that I think is a message throughout the entire country. It's been great talking with you again. Minority Leader of the Ohio House of Representatives, Dani Isaacsohn. Thank you for hanging out with us this morning. Have a safe rest of the day. Keep up the fight. We'll have you back on again before we get to the midterms. But
sounds good.
Thanks for being in the fight, sir. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for everything you're doing.
All right. Appreciate you. Talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.